Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, November 18th, 2024. All right, first thing, we have some very exciting news. Scott Horton's new book, Provoked, has been published, and you could go buy it right now on Amazon. So it's called Provoked: How Washington Started the New Cold War with Russia and the Catastrophe in Ukraine, about basically the post-Cold War history that led up to this catastrophe that we've seen over the past 2.5 years in Ukraine. And it's a long book. It's almost 700 pages. If you're familiar with Scott's other books, Fool's Errand about the war in Afghanistan and Enough Already about the war on terror, it's similar in the sense that it is just a complete repudiation of the narrative about those wars. And this is just packed full of information, packed full of footnotes. It's a long book. I haven't finished it yet. I just got the PDF from him the other day. I was hoping I would get it done before it was released, but for a 700-page book, it moves along because it's just packed with information. It just starts off right away. There's no fluff. I mean, I think it is the definitive book on this war in Ukraine. So go buy it. Right now, it's a #1 bestseller in War and Peace. I looked on the new releases list. It's number 32 out of all new books. So let's keep those numbers up and go buy your copy. My hard copy's on the way, but this is something we're definitely going to be really promoting and pushing to get out there. I think it's a great time for this book to be published during this transition period when a lot of people are talking about ending this war. But to get into the news, unfortunately, Joe Biden and his team are hell-bent on escalating this thing. So the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Biden okays long-range missile strikes on Russia. So the New York Times reported on Sunday that President Biden had authorized Ukraine's use of long-range U.S.-provided missiles in strikes on Russian territory. An escalation Moscow has made clear risks nuclear war. And then this was first reported by the New York Times, but then it was all over the place. The Washington Post had an original story on it, the Wall Street Journal, all these outlets. And U.S. officials told the Times that Ukraine can now use the Army Tactical Missile Systems, or ATACMS, which have a range of up to 190 miles, to strike Russian territory. The ATACMS are fired by U.S.-made multiple rocket launch systems, including the HIMARS, which Ukraine has. And Ukraine can only fire these HIMARS with coordinates provided by or confirmed by the U.S. So this means the U.S. is going to be directly supporting long-range strikes deep inside Russian territory. The U.S. officials said the ATACMS will likely initially be used to hit Russian troops fighting against Ukrainian forces in Russia's Kursk Oblast. Ukraine and the U.S. have also said that North Korean troops are deployed in Kursk. The U.S. has said that North Korean troops are engaged in combat, but that has not been confirmed by Russia. So earlier this year, President Biden gave Ukraine the green light to strike Russian border regions with U.S.-provided weapons, including shorter-range rockets that are fired by the HIMARS. And a few months later, Ukraine began its invasion of Kursk, where they're still fighting, where they're slowly being pushed out by the Russians. And the U.S. officials, who leaked this story, or, I wouldn't even call it a leak. I'm sure that they were told to put this out there because, again, it was everywhere. The U.S. officials speaking to the New York Times, they framed this as, this is to defend Ukrainian forces in Kursk. They're framing it as defense somehow when they're talking about the U.S. supporting long-range strikes inside Russia. So anyway, earlier this year, the initial sign-off was so Ukraine could hit Russian border regions with U.S. weapons, but they said no ATACMS, nothing long range. And then Ukraine invaded Kursk, and then there was a big push from Ukraine and from its supporters in the U.S. for the U.S. to okay these long-range strikes. And this also means that the British provided Storm Shadow missiles and the French provided Scalp missiles, which are basically the same thing. They have a range of 155 miles. This means now that those could be used in these strikes as well. So going back to September, in response to all these calls from Ukraine and from Western officials for these long-range strikes, Putin was asked about this, and he said, if NATO supported these long-range strikes inside Russia, it would mean that NATO is at war with Russia. He said it would mean direct war between NATO and Russia. That was Putin's warning. And, the point he made was it's not just a matter of giving Ukraine permission, not just saying, yeah, you can do it. They need the intelligence support from the U.S., from NATO for this. And then after those comments, Putin ordered changes to Russia's nuclear doctrine to lower the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons. And under the new doctrine, which I don't think has officially gone into effect yet, but the changes that he ordered said that an attack on Russia by a non-nuclear armed state that was supported by a nuclear power will be considered a joint attack. The Kremlin said, explicitly that the changes to the nuclear doctrine were meant as a message to the West. Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, said, quote, "This is a message that warns these countries of the consequences should they participate in an attack on our country by various means, not necessarily nuclear," end quote. So at the time, the U.S. appeared to back down on supporting the long-range strikes in Russia. But now the Biden administration is looking to escalate the proxy war as much as possible for the last few months while it's still in power. So this is a huge escalation here. And there's been some response from Russia. Maria Zakharova, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, she pointed back to Putin's comments in September. There's been some Russian members of their parliament. Tomorrow I'll probably have a story on kind of the Russian reaction. And Zelensky, said that there's been media reports and that, but he said, we're not going to announce it. Russia's going to feel the missiles, basically hinting that, yes, these strikes are coming. So this is not good. And I just mentioned at the end here, the Biden administration is saying that they think Trump's going to end the war, basically. But the man that he picked to be his national security advisor, Mike Waltz, supports this idea of supporting the long-range Ukrainian strikes in Russia. He said, he was asked, how are you going to end the war? Oh, we're going to ramp up sanctions and bankrupt Russia. And also we could let Ukraine launch long-range strikes inside of Russia. I mean, how is that any different from the hawks in the Biden administration? So that's concerning. But this is we're entering a very dangerous period, I think, here. I would guess Russia would still want to sit back and see what the Trump administration is going to do. But I guess that also depends on if these strikes really start hitting. As far as I know, Ukraine doesn't have that many of the ATACMS. And the U.S. officials even acknowledged to the New York Times that they don't think this is going to make much of a difference in the war. So it's just an escalation for the sake of escalation. But we'll see, if they really start hitting Russia hard with these missiles. I mean, man, where can this go? It's just really dangerous, really insane. All right, so the next one here. Putin tells German leader that Ukraine peace deal is possible. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone. He wrote this up on Friday. So Putin held a phone call with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and offered to end the war in Ukraine. The Russian leader offered a deal similar to one proposed by Moscow in June. So Scholz spoke with Putin on Friday for the first time in nearly 2 years. In the beginning of the war, Scholz was one of the only Western leaders, one of the few, that remained in contact with Putin, but that hasn't happened. Then he stopped that and agreed to all the escalations. But this is the first time that they've spoken in almost 2 years. So this was good news that I heard over the weekend. Hey, there's diplomacy happening, but then the long-range strikes thing comes out. So the Kremlin said, quote, "The Russian president noted that the Russian side has never refused and remains open to the resumption of negotiations that were interrupted by the Kiev regime. Russia's proposals are well known and outlined, in particular, in a June speech at the Russian Foreign Ministry," end quote. So in that speech, Putin said that if Ukrainian forces withdrew from all Russian annexed territory, adopted a position of neutrality between NATO and Russia, agreed to denazification and demilitarization of the country, and the lifting of all Western sanctions on Moscow, then Russia would bring the war to an end. Scholz's spokesman said that the German and Russian leaders agreed to remain in contact. This is one thing, so despicable, shameful about the Biden administration. Biden hasn't spoken with Putin in over 2 years. since the invasion. Blinken has spoken with Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, like 2 or 3 times, and they just discussed the prisoner swaps, nothing about the war. Diplomacy has just been completely dead. So still good to see some diplomacy, even in light of the escalation. All right, so the next one here, violence in Gaza, just really horrific. Israel kills over 100 Palestinians in Gaza in one day. So Israeli forces killed at least 111 Palestinians in Gaza on Sunday, Al Jazeera reported, citing medical sources as Israeli strikes continue to pound targets across the Strip. The majority were killed by an Israeli airstrike on a residential building in the northern city of Beit Lahia that was sheltering forcibly displaced families. Gaza's government media office said that 72 Palestinians were killed in the strike, although that number isn't confirmed. I saw the Palestinian rescuers said there was over 50 killed, but they didn't even have access to the site because this is in Beit Lahia, which has been completely under siege. I saw some videos that Reuters put out, and it was just, civilian, just regular Palestinians trying to dig through the rubble, and it's just a horrific scene. And this picture doesn't even do the destruction justice. I mean, they really just leveled a big building here. Israeli strikes on Sunday also hit the Barej and Nuseirat refugee camps in central Gaza. Middle East Eye reported at least 10 were killed in Barej and 4 were killed in Nuseirat. So Gaza's health ministry said in its daily death toll update that at least 47 Palestinians were killed over 24 hours. So they put that out midday. And then these medical sources that Al Jazeera cited, they were talking about Sunday, like the whole day, from morning till night. Just really, really horrific in northern Gaza, where this ethnic cleansing campaign is happening. It's just relentless slaughter. All right, so the next one here, Pope Francis urges genocide probe of Israel's war on Gaza. This article is from Brett Wilkins. We reprinted from Common Dreams. In a new book set to be released this week, Pope Francis endorsed a genocide investigation into Israel's war on Gaza, which has killed or maimed more than 150,000 Palestinians and forcibly displaced, starved, or sickened millions more over the past 13 months. So the Pope wrote in this book, which is going to be released on November 19th, competing with Provoked, quote, in the Middle East, where the open doors of nations like Jordan or Lebanon continue to be a salvation for millions of people fleeing conflicts in the region, I am thinking above all of those who leave Gaza in the midst of the famine that has struck their Palestinian brothers and sisters, given the difficulty of getting food and aid into their territory. According to some experts, what is happening in Gaza has the characteristics of a genocide. It should be carefully investigated to determine whether it fits into the technical definition formulated by jurists and international bodies, end quote. So the Pope's words echo last week's findings by a UN expert panel that Israel's annexation of Gaza is consistent with the characteristics of genocide. Very similar to what he said. The International Court of Justice is currently weighing a South African-led genocide case against Israel, backed by more than 30 nations and regional blocs, as well as hundreds of groups and experts around the world. So many jurists, scholars, and other experts, including some of Israel's leading Holocaust historians, have called Israel's policies and actions in Gaza genocide. Early in the war, Raz Siegel, an Israeli historian and professor of Holocaust and genocide studies at Stockton University in New Jersey, called Israel's Gaza onslaught a textbook case of genocide. And then he just gets into some of the situation for Palestinian Christians. Many have been killed, injured, or otherwise harmed by Israeli forces. The most infamous case was the bombing of the St. Porphyrius Greek Orthodox Church. That killed 18 Palestinians, including numerous children. And some of the victims were related, 2 women and an infant who were related to Justin Amash, former Republican congressman. And an Israeli sniper fatally shot an elderly woman and her daughter on the grounds of the Catholic Church in Gaza City. After that, Pope Francis condemned what he called an act of terrorism. All right, so the next one here. Settler leader says she scouted a location for settlements in Gaza. So Israeli settler activist Daniela Weiss has claimed that she has scouted a location in northern Gaza where she wants to establish Jewish settlements. And this was reported by Haaretz on Sunday. In an appearance on Israel's Channel 13 on Saturday night, Weiss said that she had 740 families who were ready to move into Gaza and that she hoped to get support from 1 million to 2 million people. She said, quote, "Yesterday we were on a tour at a temporary site near the Gaza border where we set up 40 trailers that will eventually move into Gaza," end quote. So they're putting stuff on the border. I know some of them are camping out right on the border of Gaza, ready to go in. When asked if she had actually entered Gaza, Weiss said, quote, "The truth is we are still a few steps away from real estate, but yes, I was in the field," end quote. In response to Weiss's comments, an Israeli military spokesman said, quote, "If this indeed occurred, it was a violation of the laws and regulations," end quote. So Weiss hinted that she entered the Netzarim corridor, this strip of land that actually was once the site of a Jewish settlement until 2005. It's currently controlled by the Israeli military. It's where they've just bulldozed all the buildings. They're putting up military bases, and they continue to widen this area. So that's definitely a place where they have an eye to build settlements. And the Israeli military is also conducting the ethnic cleansing campaign in northern Gaza, which involves demolishing houses so that Palestinians have nowhere to return to, and that's expected to also pave the way for Jewish settlements. So Netanyahu has claimed that he's opposed to settling Gaza, but what is that? That just doesn't mean anything that Netanyahu has said that, because this idea of settling Gaza is openly supported by many Israeli ministers and members of the Knesset who recently attended a Resettle Gaza conference that was led by Weiss. When asked about Netanyahu's stated objection to settlements, Weiss said, quote, "If it's unrealistic, we'll make it realistic. What did we do here in the settlements of Judea and Samaria? We turn the unrealistic into the realistic. We will do the same there," end quote. So at the Resettle Gaza conference last month, Weiss said Jewish settlements would start popping up in Gaza within a year. She said, quote, "In less than a year, each one of you can call me and ask me if I succeeded in fulfilling my dreams. Actually, you don't even have to call me. You will witness how Jews go to Gaza and Arabs disappear from Gaza," end quote. So, this is what the U.S. is supporting. This is what the U.S. is funding. This is what's probably going to end up happening, is people like this lady, Daniela Weiss, are going to live out their dreams of conquering Gaza, funded, enabled, and supported by the U.S. government. All right, so the next one here, Israeli strike in Beirut kills Hezbollah media chief. This article is from Jason Ditz. The metro area around Beirut, particularly the southern suburbs, have been the focus of near daily Israeli strikes for weeks now. And then on Sunday, an Israeli strike hit central Beirut, Lebanon's capital, in the Ras al-Naba district. The strike targeted a building belonging to the Syrian Ba'ath Party, the ruling party of Syria, and killed at least 5. Among the slain was Mohammed Afif, Hezbollah's media relations chief. The other casualties have yet to be identified. Syria's Ba'ath Secretary General for Lebanon, Ali Hijazi, confirmed the killing of Afif. He added that Afif was not a combatant and was only the head of Hezbollah's media unit, but he was at the party building for a meeting at the time of the attack. The strike reportedly damaged a large number of cars in addition to nearly destroying the building. So more Israeli strikes right in Beirut. And somehow, you see the headlines like the Times of Israel. The headline is, Israel kills Hezbollah's top propaganda chief, as if that justifies killing someone involved in media. It's like a spokesman. It's like killing a spokesman or a spokeswoman. All right, so the next one here, Israeli strike in southern Lebanon kills 2 Lebanese soldiers. This is another one from Jason. So Israel has repeatedly insisted that they are at war with Hezbollah, not Lebanon, and that they have not been deliberately targeting Lebanese military in the course of their invasion of Lebanon. Despite those comments, they keep hitting Lebanese military targets. So on Sunday, the Lebanese army reported one of their posts was targeted by an Israeli airstrike against the town of Al-Mari. At least 2 soldiers were killed and injured. At least 2 others were injured. The Army statement went on to say that the incident was the result of Israel directly targeting the post and that 36 soldiers have been killed since the beginning of the invasion as a result of Israeli aggression. So they've killed 36 of these Lebanese National Army soldiers, and they claim that they're not targeting them. So there was more strikes in the same area that killed a man and his 2 small children. So more children killed in Lebanon. And this area, there's no indication of any sort of valid military target at the site of this strike. And the population of this town, Mari, is overwhelmingly Druze, which with a minority of about 10% Greek Orthodox Christian. All right, so the next one here, Lebanon rescuer picks up pieces of father after Israeli strike. This article is from AFP. So Susan Karkaba, she is a Lebanese civil defense rescuer. And basically this story is about her account of when Israel bombed the Civil Defense Center the other day. And she had to go back there and pick pieces of her father, who was also a rescuer, out of the rubble. I mean, it is just absolutely criminal how many rescuers, first responders have been killed. They bombed the main civil defense facility in eastern Baalbek. It killed nearly 20 rescuers who were still inside. Actually, there was 20 inside and at least 14 were killed. And this is Karkaba. She said, quote, "My dad was sleeping here with them. He helped people and recovered bodies to return them to their families. But now it's my turn to pick up the pieces of my dad," end quote. Unlike many first responder facilities previously targeted during the war, this facility in Durrës on the edge of Baalbek City was state-run and had no political affiliation. So this has just been a big part of Israel's war in Lebanon, is targeting the rescuers and medical workers. All right, the next one here, the U.S., Japan, and Australia agree to increase drills. So the U.S., Japan, and Australia agreed on Sunday to increase trilateral military cooperation as Washington is working to boost alliances in the region as part of its plans to prepare for a future war with China. And that's not me being hyperbolic there. The U.S. is openly preparing for a future war with China, as crazy as that may sound to you or I. So defense ministers from the 3 countries, including U.S. Secretary of State Lloyd Austin, met in Darwin, Australia, which is home to a U.S. military base that's being expanded to house U.S. B-52 long-range bombers. The defense ministers announced the 3 militaries will begin conducting trilateral amphibious military drills starting in 2025 during Australia's biennial Talisman Sabre, which has gotten much bigger in recent years. Australia will also send troops to participate in Orient Shield, which is a joint U.S.-Japan exercise that takes place in Japan. Last year, this new military agreement between Australia and Japan went into effect. Basically, it's a reciprocal force agreement, which means they can deploy troops to each other's territory more easily now. Australia was the first country that Japan signed a deal like that with, besides the U.S., since the end of World War II. So this is big part of the U.S.'s strategy, is building these new alliances, encouraging their treaty allies like Japan, Australia, also the Philippines, even South Korea, to, increase cooperation among themselves, and then also as part of a bigger picture. Recently, the U.S., Japan, Australia, and the Philippines all conducted military exercises together in the South China Sea, very provocative toward China, very sensitive area. Again, this is just such a big part. This is kind of the whole strategy. Besides, just spending more to build up military bases in the region, the other big part of the strategy is this alliance building. And this is something China, of course, is very unhappy about. And the next one here, Xi urges extreme caution from the U.S. on Taiwan and the South China Sea. So this article is from the South China Morning Post. Biden and President Xi Jinping met. They were both in Peru for this event. I forget exactly what it was, but if you saw, there's a video going around of Biden giving a little speech at a podium in the jungle, and then he turns around and kind of just wanders off into the jungle. It really cracked me up. But anyway, he met with Xi. So This is South China Morning Post's report on it. President Xi Jinping has urged Washington to exercise extreme caution in handling matters related to Taiwan and avoid fanning provocative actions in the South China Sea, according to Beijing's foreign ministry. The ministry on Sunday released an online statement on the talks between Xi and outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation meetings in Lima, Peru. Taiwan independence forces were fundamentally incompatible with peace and stability in the region, Xi told Biden, as he called on Washington to explicitly oppose such moves and support China's peaceful reunification, according to the statement. The statement said, quote, if the U.S. wishes to maintain peace in the region, it is critical to recognize the Taiwan independence nature of Taiwanese leader William Lai Ching-te and his administration, end quote. Xi also listed Taiwan among 4 red lines for exchange with Washington, alongside democracy and human rights, political systems, and Beijing's development right, saying they must not be challenged. So what he's talking about there is, the U.S. sanctions China all the time in the name of democracy and human rights. They also criticize their political system all the time. They say that the 21st century is a battle between democracy and autocracy, referring to China. Biden brought that message once to the Gulf. He was in Saudi Arabia delivering a speech to all these Gulf monarchs, saying that it's democracy versus autocracy. But that always stuck in my head. But this is what he's referencing here. And the development right, he's speaking about U.S. economic sanctions that are targeting certain industries in China, mostly the chip industry, the semiconductors. So tensions have been high in the Taiwan Strait since its independence leading leader, William Lai, branded by Beijing as a troublemaker, was sworn into office in May. Beijing, which sees Taiwan as part of China to be reunited by force if necessary, has since stepped up its military drills around the island. The United States does not recognize self-governed Taiwan as an independent state, but is opposed to any attempt, to take the island by force. And the other key context here is that in recent years, the U.S. has really increased military and diplomatic support for Taiwan. So this is more kind of Xi reiterating that Taiwan is this serious red line for China. And then they also get into the South China Sea, saying that the U.S. should not encourage or support provocative actions. The U.S. is very supportive of the Philippines and their maritime dispute with China. This is an area of the world I really want to start putting more focus on, especially now that we have this Trump administration, which is going to be stacked with China hawks. Not that the Biden administration isn't, but some of the China hawks in the incoming Trump administration say we should wind down Ukraine so we could focus more on China. So we might see even more of a pivot toward Asia. All right, so the next one here, Iran denies its ambassador met with Elon Musk. So on Saturday, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi denied a report published by the New York Times that said Iran's ambassador to the UN held a meeting with Elon Musk about the incoming Trump administration. Araghchi said, quote, this reported meeting was a fabricated story by American media, and the motives behind this can also be speculated. In my opinion, the American media's fabrication about a meeting between Elon Musk and Iran's representative is a form of testing the waters to see if the ground for such a move exists, end quote. Araghchi said Iran is looking for the incoming administration to clarify its policies, and based on that, Iran will adjust its policies. He added that Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei hadn't given permission for such a meeting to occur. So this report from the New York Times cited anonymous Iranian officials, and I never know about the New York Times Iranian sources. They said that the meeting was about how to diffuse tensions between the U.S. and Iran. But now we have Iran denying it happened. They denied this on Saturday. The report was published on Thursday. So it was about 2 days later that the denial came. The Trump team was asked about it, and they said they wouldn't comment. I haven't seen Elon Musk say anything about it. If anybody has, let me know. But I don't think he's responded at all to this report, this claim that he met with Iran's ambassador to the UN. And unfortunately, all signs indicate that the incoming Trump administration is going to be very hawkish on Iran. Again, judging by the team, judging by Trump's previous Iran policies, that's what we have to base our judgment on. It's going to be very, very hawkish toward Iran. All right, so the last story here, the Pentagon is still unable to pass an audit. This one is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. The Department of Defense's inability to track its finances continues as the Pentagon failed its 7th audit on Friday. The DoD has a massive budget of $820 billion and spent over $170 million on the failed audit. It's an expensive audit. So since 2018, Congress has mandated the Pentagon to undergo an audit each year with the goal of the DoD passing the financial report by 2028. I don't think they're going to get there. That's only a few years away. So far, the Pentagon has been unable to pass the audit. While department officials say they are making progress, still fewer than 1/3 of the Pentagon's agencies have passed. And I know in previous years, I don't know about the exact numbers of this one, it was something like more than like around $500 billion that they couldn't account for or something. So it's totally crazy. So Michael McCord, the Pentagon's Undersecretary of Defense and Chief Financial Officer, said, quote, "This result was not a surprise, and I know that on the surface it doesn't sound like we're making progress. However, that is not the case. I believe the department has turned a corner in its understanding of the challenges and, more importantly, in addressing those challenges," end quote. So who knows? Maybe that, what is it called? The Department of Government Efficiency that Elon Musk is going to be overseeing. Maybe they'll take a look at the Pentagon. I know if they do listen to Ron Paul, he's certainly going to recommend that they look at the Pentagon. So we'll see if they listen to him. Another thing about Musk, we're talking about China and the Trump administration. So it seems like Musk is going to have Trump's ear. And one thing that I don't think he is a China hawk, because he does a lot of business in China. And, I know he said things like, he said something about China, like positive about China's, the development in China, things that they've done in China. This was a while ago, maybe even a couple years ago on Twitter. He just said something like, "Oh, it's great, what they've done in China with this, and that," and it angered all these people got mad at him just for saying that. But again, he goes over there and he has a very warm welcome. He makes a lot of money in China, so I think he's going to be, but who knows if he's going to really have any influence on that type of foreign policy. But I'm sure he's not going to be recommending any hawkish steps toward China. If anything, he might oppose some of the trade war stuff that Trump's going to do, or that Biden has continued and ramped up. And Trump's probably going to continue and ramp up as well. So anyway, that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints, one from Ted Snyder. A common thread runs through Trump appointments. Look out, Iran. One from Ray McGovern. Will Gabbard be able to direct the intel community? One from Bryce Green at Fair. Despite history of fabrication, press uncritically covers IDF-provided Hamas documents. One from Mike Fredenberg, by the numbers, U.S. missile capacity depleting fast. And our spotlight is from Matthew Petty, Trump's incredibly confusing new national security cabinet. So please go check all of that out. That was a lot of stuff to go over, but it's usually the weekend. We're catching up on a lot of things. Again, go purchase a copy of Provoked by Scott Horton. It's definitely worth the read. And I'm really excited about it. I know now he's probably going to go on a, media tour to promote it. I think it's going to do really well. Again, I think it's just a great time for it to be coming out right now during this transition period as people are talking about it. And it's just, Ukraine's more in the news right now than it's been with this latest big escalation. So hopefully that motivates more people to look for a book on it. And Amazon, again, like I went to the book section and there was a little thing that said movers and shakers, whatever that means. And it was 3 books, pictures of 3 books. And one of them was Provoked by Scott Horton. So it looks like, it's getting sold a lot. So I think Amazon's going to put it in front of people. And then I know the Kindle version, the ebook version, is Scott said is going to come out in a couple days. Could even be tomorrow. The audiobook is going to take longer. I have no idea what his timeline is on that. I know at one point recently he was talking about he might put it out as like a series, like a podcast series, and put it behind a paywall at a Substack or something, so you don't have to wait forever for him to record the whole thing. You can get like an hour at a time or so. I think that would be cool. So yeah, it's exciting. I'm happy. Scott's going to be probably returning to Twitter and everything, so it should be a fun few weeks, few months now. But yeah, I think the book's going to do really good. So anyway, that's it for me for today. Support us, supportantiwar.com. I will be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.